Unfortunately, an awful thing happened late last night in our nation's capital when two young, soon to be engaged individuals, one from Kansas, the other from Jerusalem. It's an awful story. The man in this relationship was planning to propose, had already bought her a ring, and they were shot and killed in cold anti Semitic blood on the streets of our nation's capital. And this is what globalized the Intifada leads to. This is why everyone on a college campus that has been moronically walking around saying, globalize the Intifada, this is what they are calling for. This is unfortunately what happens in Israel quite often. A terrorist comes up and kills someone because they happen to be Jewish. And it felt sadly inevitable to me that this would occur. But here is, I want to play the audio because there's no uncertainty about exactly what happened here. Here is the individual who will soon be charged with the crime, if he has not already been, shouting "Free, free Palestine" after he murdered two Israeli diplomats on the streets of Washington, D.C. Here's cut two.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
So there's no uncertainty about what his motives are. This is a chant that has been screamed loudly on college campuses everywhere in many different American streets by people who claim that Israel is the bad guy in the wake of October 7th. Let me make sure that you know these individuals' names. This is the Israeli ambassador, Yakel Leiter, discussing these victims and talking about his conversation with President Trump.
The young man purchased a ring this week with the intention of proposing to his girlfriend next week in Jerusalem. They were a beautiful couple who came to enjoy an evening in Washington's Cultural Center. On the way in, Ms. Bondi was kind enough to hand me the phone. On the other line was the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who told me that his administration is going to do everything it can possibly do to fight and end anti-Semitism and the hatred that's being directed, the demonization and delegitimization of the State of Israel.
Okay, Buck, you and I don't think, sadly, are surprised. I was just about getting ready to go to bed when the alert popped up on my phone late last night, a little bit after midnight. To me, it felt inevitable based on the way that the United States, many people in the United States, on the left in particular, but also there's people on the right who are anti-Semitic. This is where I would say the left and the right, unfortunately, sometimes have agreement, but it's far more pronounced, certainly on the left wing right now, anti-Semitism is. And this, to me, is a natural result of being unable to distinguish between good and evil, such that you then engage in evil acts yourself because you believe you're doing something that is right and just. And this is the importance of being able to teach right and wrong. And unfortunately, the younger you are in this country, the more likely you are to buy into the idea that the Israeli state is the bad guy here.
We recognize that. First of all, it's heartbreaking to see this, and I sit here and just say that murdering a beautiful couple like this in cold blood outside a social event, I don't know what could be more demonic, senseless. And, it's interesting to me that the media, whenever there is anything that they can say somehow involves right-wing ideology, they'll speak of something called, and we've discussed it on the show, stochastic terrorism. So numerically random terrorism is effectively what it is. Like, if you do this enough, if you spread this message enough, somebody will commit an act of terrorism. They'll talk about that if they can say that this is somehow racist right-wing ideology. Meanwhile, the left is soaked in anti-Israel, anti-Semitic hatred, top to bottom, day in and day out. It's in the media, it's on campuses. There's safe harbor given and platform given to it in the Democrat Party. And we are just to think that this now happens in some kind of vacuum. This comes up, Clay, when we have the discussions about they can't say that Trump is Hitler, but they oppose violence against Trump. That doesn't really make sense, does it? If you believe that Trump was Hitler, which is an insane person's statement, but the Democrats have said it countless times, as we know. But if you truly believed that, then you would want to do anything to remove that threat from the United States. And of course, we saw that two people tried in the election cycle, and one put a bullet through Trump's ear. If you truly believe that there is a genocide going on in Gaza, first of all, you can't read or you can't process information because this wouldn't be a long and drawn out war if it was a genocide. Israel could just flatten all of Gaza in a matter of days, no ifs, ands, or buts, and that would be the end of it. They could kill every man, woman, and child in Gaza if they chose to do so. The reason the war is taking so long is first and foremost, Hamas and the Gazans refused to release civilian hostages that were taken at the start of this war in the horrible October 7th terrorist massacre. So to me, there is such an inversion of morality that goes on here. And I point this out as well, Clay, because you said this yesterday. I've been advancing this point on the show as much as I can because I started out in Middle East studies in my life back in college, working on the Arab-Israeli issue. My first ever real internship was for Dennis Ross, the U.S. ambassador under Clinton for the Arab-Israeli peace accords. So I've been following this for a very long time, and I'm aware of a lot of the different dynamics. But in this country, it has turned into a shrill left-wing rallying cry, absent facts, and just full of hatred. And that results in things like we've seen on the campuses, which is completely disgusting, and then can even result in things like this. I would want to ask these individuals who are on the campuses. I want to ask the people who are always talking about the genocide and Gaza, where are they on the genocide? And I know it sounds like a whataboutism to some people that want to make that claim, Clay. Where's the talk about the genocide going on in South Sudan? Is it do they care about every human life and depression? Do they care about hospitals being bombed? How many of them even know that a hospital was just bombed in South Sudan? They have no idea. They don't pay any attention because that is a fight among a lot of different ethnic groups, but Arab Muslims, Black Africans, there's no white people involved. And when there's no white people involved, even though 400,000 people have died, there have been mass rapes, there has been ethnic cleansing. I mean, the most horrific stuff imaginable. It's been going on for over a decade, I might add. And yet none of the people that are walking around with keffiyehs on talking about how every life matters and stop genocide, they don't know a damn thing about it. You know why? Because they're cosplaying as revolutionaries and they're just feeding in to this anti-white narrative that they think somehow explains the Israel-Hamas war. And that is how stupid they are. And that is how malevolent their ideology is. And it results in things like we saw last night.
I think all that's very well said. I know there are maybe some people out there with kids, grandkids that don't get this. Let me give you two things that I think are very simple that you can share with them and ask them to think about. One is, and I was over in December, and I don't remember who told me this, but I've heard it repeated since. But the first time I heard it was in Israel. And it is this. If Israel put down its weapons, it wouldn't exist tomorrow. If every other country in the Middle East that hates Israel put down its weapons, there would be peace in the Middle East. Israel is not the aggressor. Israel is trying to protect itself, and most of its foes want Israel, as you saw on October 7th, the Jewish people in Israel wiped off the face of the earth. That's what from the river to the sea means. So that's an easy one that I think that everybody can grasp. And two is another analogy we have made. And I think it's a good one because people sometimes say, okay, well, why do you care? How do you decide who's good, who's bad? Well, I was there in all the kibbutzes where all the innocent people were murdered when Hamas decided to come into Israel and rape and pillage and murder across a wide expanse. But I want you to think about this. When Biden had our southern border wide open, or even now, if somehow it were to occur, if a Mexican terror organization came across our southern border and killed 1,200 Americans and kidnapped hundreds of them and went back into Mexico and claimed that they shouldn't be attacked because women and children might be harmed, what would we do to the part of Mexico that the terrorists were in? Buck, you
I
were
would
in the
play.
CIA. What do you think
Yeah.
we would do if they killed 1,200 Americans, went back across their border, and had hundreds of hostages?
Well, I joined the CIA because of 9/11. So we can even use a more direct historical analogy here. I think that October 7th was Israel's 9/11.
Yeah.
And I mean, very clearly, and as a matter of percentages, I think it might even be higher than 9/11 when you
Oh,
look at the U.S.
infinitely higher because the
So
Israeli population is so much smaller.
so when you factor this out, yeah, after 9/11, I will add, by the way, there's actually a pretty good Hunt for Bin Laden on Netflix. If anyone's curious to look for something, it's pretty well done. My old friend Gary Burnson, who led the Jawbreaker team, is on it. Mike Morrell, whom I worked for in the CIA, who's a lib and a Hillary guy, but there's some people that were there doing the work, and they're pretty good. But Clay, people, I think sometimes leave this part out of our response. After 9/11, we said to the Taliban, "Okay, you guys have him. You hand him over, or else." They chose or else.
Yeah.
We had no choice. There is no choice, because the choice to not do anything would be the choice to let evil win. And and Israel has the same choice after October 7th. And this is this is where I get very frustrated, because there are people out there who think themselves clever because somehow the only thing they ever have a problem with is a response to terrorism.
Yeah.
It's always the response isn't good enough. It's a little bit like arguing with somebody who's wrong and just says, "I don't like your tone. I don't like your tone." Well, how are we going to, or is it who's right is what matters? Okay. You can complain about my tone all day, and Hamas brought this war upon themselves. They could have ended this war after October 7th for months and months and months, given the hostages back, and had an unconditional surrender. They chose not to do it. They don't just hold Israelis hostage, they hold themselves hostage. That's the problem. They've decided we would rather light ourselves on fire as a people in Gaza than join civilization and stop this madness.
Wall Street Journal last weekend had a piece that I thought was important. I shared it. People say, why did Hamas do it? Well, certainly they're horrible anti-Semites, right? They want Israel wiped off and the Jewish people wiped off the planet. But in particular, the timing of October 7th seems to have been directly tied to fear that Saudi Arabia was going to normalize relations with Israel, and that would lead to more peace in the Middle East. And they didn't want that to happen because they thought that would undercut their political posture. So the reason they attacked on October 7th was they were trying to stop peace from spreading even more substantially in the Middle East. They're evil. And I think you saw the motivation, and any of you out there with kids or grandkids walking around saying, globalize the Intifada, I think that they are so poorly educated that they do not even understand how much of morons they truly are. Look, we're going to talk more about this. We're going to go to Israel and talk with Yael Eckstein. She works at the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, about what the reaction is in Israel, which I'm sure is widely discussed and was crushing to so many people over there to hear that two young, innocent people who were soon to be engaged were murdered in cold blood for being Jewish. This is why, our friend Carol Markowitz tweeted that Jews need to go buy as many guns as they can. And she in particular, she's on a plane or she'd be with us today. Maybe we can get her on tomorrow. But she in particular, Buck, this, went and taught herself how to fire a gun after October 7th. And there are a lot of women out there in particular.
I took her out and taught her how to fire guns. We took her out for a range day so that she knew how to defend herself.
So many people are like this. I mean, I talked about when I was in Israel, I met a woman who's working with the IFCJ, young mom, walks around with a handgun on her hip everywhere she goes now. She was in the hospital having just delivered a baby on October 7th. And her mom was killed on October 7th. Her brothers had to go rescue her husband, who was holding a butcher knife right by the door to try to stab people if they came in to kill their infant children. I mean, this is the reality of what people in Israel deal with every day. And unfortunately, globalize the Intifada is spread here. If you want to educate, you want people to learn more, trust me, just go to ifcj.org. You can learn. Click there. so you can talk to the kids and grandkids in your family. Please just trust me. ifcj.org. Go learn what is going on, what Israel is having to deal with, and trying to defend itself in its very existence. ifcj.org is that website. Click the Learn tab, ifcj.org.